welcome back to the BA Project, where we talk about the good, the bad, and this week, the technical relationships in business analysis. My name is Drew, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Catherine and Christina. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, hi. Good week?
Very good week.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I've got a new turtleneck on, so I'm all ready to go.
In your art, in your log cabin?
Obviously. Always.
Yeah.
It's like we color coordinated tonight, Catherine. You didn't get the memo, Drew.
No. We're bringing the darkness.
Yeah,
I know. So this week, we're going to dive into one of the most important relationships, the business analyst and the solution architect. Now, none of us at the BA Project claim to be technical experts, so we've drafted in one of the best. And this week, to give us their perspective on this unique relationship, we have a very special guest. This person has more technical I can't speak, it's late in the day, more technical knowledge in their little finger than the rest of us, the BA Project combined, and they are a big part of the Microsoft Power Platform community and all-around great guy. Please welcome Mr. Oliver Rodrigues. Hi, Ollie.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Ollie.
Good.
How's everyone doing?
Good.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
Thanks for doing it. We promise to take it easy for the first couple of questions.
All right. That's perfect. Let's see how you treat me.
Yeah, obviously, with respect. No, we're going to just put some questions to you and chat through them and try to get your perspective on that relationship, because it's different from project to project and from BA to SA. So the first question we're going to talk about is about real-time validation of outputs versus blocking out time for that validation to happen with the project plan, and really to talk about what your perspective is and which one you would value most, I guess. So when you're working on projects, would you prefer that you had that time built into the project plan weeks out, that you knew, okay, every Friday I'm going to get to validate these requirements. Every Monday I'm going to get to review these process. Do you like that structure and routine, and do you think that works? Or would you rather to be involved day to day?
Well, I think to answer that question, first of all, I would like to have that option. We don't always have that option, and I'm going to go through a few things here that kind of drives that perspective. I think, like, in general, like, if I had the choice to go always real-time validation, that would be amazing. So that would be my preferred option. So in terms of a few benefits here that I can think of, if we are, if you have a technical person or a solution architect involved in those initial discussions, we'll minimize a lot those follow-up tasks, between SA and BAs. And as well, if BAs have any questions, and that's kind of holding up the workshops, the discussions, the technical person is able there in real time to help them with that, and just speeds up quite a lot the project. We know that's not always possible, and like, one of the main factors here is budget, right? We normally would have one solution architect per project, but we might have multiple BAs. We might have multiple. They might be working in different work streams within the same project. So the SA can't physically be split into multiple workshops. So that's one challenge, and as well budget, right? We normally don't have budget for multiple solution architects depending on the project size. I think another thing here that I wanted to mention is it also depends on the type of that workshop or maybe that requirement. Sometimes the BA is exploring at a level very behind, like very process mapping and very early stage, talking about user personas or user adoption, or how are they using the system. And sometimes technology agnostic, we don't need a technical input at all. So I think it depends on that factor as well. And well, ultimately, there's sometimes that we don't have an option, and that we do need to block time after, which would be, let's say, for example, we have an external dependency, right? Another technical team or a system interface that the technical person will need to validate anyway with that external team. So in those scenarios, we kind of have no option. We can't do a real-time validation. We would have to allocate some time and do a review after. But yeah, I hope I answered your question. So preferred option, real-time validation, but that's not always the case.
I think with real-time validation, my worry would be that, especially when it's kind of in workshops or maybe in customer-facing scenarios, I'd be nervous that I'd be putting the solution architect on the spot. Would you like a BA to kind of obviously make that reference to you ahead of time to say, I want that relationship, I want that kind of, getting ideas out in the workshop, but I don't expect you to do that validation there.
I think that if the solution architect there doesn't have the answer or doesn't know or needs to validate that offline, I think a solution architect would be senior enough to say, look, apologies, don't have the answer here, need to come back to you next week. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're talking about someone more junior, let's say there's a tacky guy, but a little bit more junior, and then putting that person on spot is a tricky scenario. So I feel like solution architects would be fine, but a person more junior definitely is tricky.
Christina, with your experience, have you found it more beneficial to have somebody in the room with you rather than a big bang at the end of discovery saying, here's my analysis package, come back to me when you tell me something's wrong? Which has been better for you?
To be honest, sometimes it kind of depends on the personality of the solution architect as well. So I've worked with various solution architects over my time, and I know that a working relationship is better that they're sitting listening in, because I'm a big talker, I'm a big personality in workshops, and when I'm in a workshop, it's my workshop and I'm running it. Shock, I'm a big talker. But there's sometimes when I don't have a mature working relationship with an architect, and I find that having their presence in a workshop and them, maybe they're a big personality as well, and it hinders my ability to ask the questions in a free flowing and a safe space for my customer. Because the minute that a customer starts hearing technical terms or technical questions, or then they clam up and they think they get this sort of internal mind talk that I'm too thick to be here. I don't understand what's going on here. And that's something that I've experienced. But I for those architects that I have a good working relationship with and we understand how each other tick, it's great, because I know that I can not put them under pressure, but I can call out to them and ask them potentially for a solution, or more times than not to tell me that fundamentally won't work, rather than giving me a direct answer. Let me understand that that's a limitation of the product and it can't be done. But the thing that I worry about is not giving them enough information, having them come up with a solution about a small requirement, and then we get to the end of a waterfall analysis and they realize that what they had, an option that they'd given me at the start, was misinformed because they didn't understand the full ask. So the real-time validation, I think, can work when it's really segmented requirements. But if it's a big end-to-end application process that takes a month or 6 weeks to 8 weeks to elicit, I kind of worry about getting those little snippets of validation in between. So I think it depends on the architect you're working with and the size and the scale of the requirements, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'd be worried about is when you block out time for validation, it maybe loses a little bit of the context that the business has given you in the workshop. If it's happening like 20 minutes after the workshop or 20 minutes after that call, you still have that emotional response that the customer had. Whereas if you're waiting till Friday to validate that, I think everybody has lost that emotional connection to how that person feels. So if you kind of go back with, actually, maybe that's not a priority, I think your acceptance of whatever the solution architect says or whatever the technical input could be, as a BA, you might lose a little bit of what your business has actually told you if you wait too long.
That's actually a fair point, Catherine, because if I'm talking to a customer and they bring, a pain point that, we have two technical solutions, a simpler and a more complex one, but depending on how they react on each one, like I might be super happy to implement them more complex, because they are more excited, or it will just help them better with their business. Or like sometimes it's even the opposite. I'm technically speaking of like thinking of a real cool solution here, and then they're like, yeah, look, this is not really that big of a deal. Like we can do a few extra manual clicks here. It's not a problem. So it does. Yeah, it doesn't add.
Hey, Ollie.
Say again.
You sound like a BA.
Oh. maybe I'm moving to the BA team. Who knows?
Well, listen, we will snap you up. But don't say yes before you hear the next topic, because you have to dig a little deeper into that and to talk about a solution architect's perspective of an output that the BA is fundamentally responsible for, being that requirement, the functional requirement. Myself, Catherine, Christina would be pretty aligned in what a good requirement is, or what good looks like for requirements. And we live in user stories day to day, and that's requirements to us. For you as an architect, what does a good requirement look like? I know it's a broad question, but from your experience, what do you want from a requirement?
Cool. So, I think first of all, maybe just backtracking a little bit. So I am a solution architect within Dynamics 365 and Power Platform space. So I think like one of the elements here of getting a good requirement in my hands would really, one of the factors here is how much does the BA is familiar with the platform or the technology, right? Because we're using Dynamics and Power Platform, we have, for example, a bunch of data types that are built in the platform. We have a bunch of out-of-the-box functionality, subgrids and forms, and how views work, and how everything works out of the box. So if a requirement comes to us too generic, it might just take longer to process that requirement. If a requirement comes to us already mentioning some features, some capabilities of the platform, it does help a lot. Now, this is more narrow to the Power Platform space. If it's something more generic, it has to be something more generic. There's no other way, I guess. But that's one element. Let me see here. Sorry.
No. Can I ask a question on that? Because I think that's super interesting. With documenting that requirement, and if you were my SA, I would be so hesitant to design for you in that requirement, because I'd feel like I was pigeonholing you and I was leading you down a path you probably didn't want to go down. And if it was my requirement, I guarantee you I would. But I'd be so afraid of design and open up that negotiation all over again when we get to our tech validation eventually.
And I think that's a fair point. I think it's nice. Like again, if we go back to the previous question, like when will the SA be validating those requirements or those user stories? If it's very early stages, we'll be designing that together. Now, if the requirement is already in saying something I don't agree from a technical perspective, in our case, it's very easy, but like I would hope the solution architect has that flexibility to go back to the BAC and say, look, by the way, there's a better way to do this. By the way, this here is, I don't know, it's not right, or it's not whatever, and then just explain better the requirement and refine that requirement together.
Yeah, I think that comes. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No. It's just this one is one that I'm like super passionate about, because like I'm really glad to hear you say that, Ollie, because like I'm quite comfortable with D365 and the Power Platform and things like that. So if I know that this is the only way to do it, like if I'm totally confident that it has to be fields on a form, or it has to be a list view, or we're going to use a BPF or something like that, then I love to hear that that's okay for us as business analysts to do that. And like a lot of our customers are moving towards the out of the box, just configuration, no code, no code, and they want us to help them have a product that's modular and can take wave updates and won't break. Basically, they can keep adding on, and the way for them to do that is to keep it out of the box. So that's something that I've like always sort of vocalized in this group, that I'm super passionate about business analysts being a bit more functional so we can understand limitations. And if we know that this is the only way to do it, there's no point in us making it very generic and acceptance criteria. We can say we're going to use fields in a form, and here's the layout, and here's the list view that's going to drive that, and here's the criteria, because then the customer knows exactly what they're getting. Like they're ultimately going to sign it off once it's been validated, but at least you've taken them on that journey, and maybe you've used a POC and you've shown them what a form might look like or what a BPF might look like. So for me personally, that's great to hear that that's welcomed by you, at least, Ollie. Maybe not
100%.
all to be the same, but it's nice to hear that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to talk to other solution architects on the same topic, but I would think everybody would have the same view.
I think it just shows how important that relationship is, because if some solution architects don't feel the same way, I need to know that, but we also need to have that open relationship where you can question the requirements. And I think myself and Christina, Andrew, are probably the same in that way, where I would happily have a solution architect question what I've written rather than bring it to a point where they kind of say, well, I didn't know what that meant. I would prefer to be questioned at an earlier stage, because we're all human. We can make mistakes, or we can maybe put something down that's not completely right. And I prefer to have that relationship with the SA rather than wait, until there's that documentation point and everybody's having a panic attack because of a requirement.
And just on that as well, Catherine. Sorry, I was just going to say here one more thing on the same question. I think it's not just from a solution architect's perspective. I feel like a good requirement has to be easy to understand, and not be subjective. Every stakeholder, either technical or non-technical team, they need to have the same interpretation of that requirement. And I think it kind of lines up with what you were saying there, Catherine, as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think when you do have it too open, you get to maybe acceptance testing, and kind of people say, well, actually I have no idea what this means. So I think there has to be a little bit of description in there to showcase actually what we mean when we talk about a requirement.
And I think just the last thing on that is, like, we don't claim to be technical or functional people as business analysts. So even if we do propose a solution because it's out of the box configuration, I always like to round out my conversations with, I equally don't know what I'm talking about here. So like, I think we're all very welcoming of that feedback, and we only want to learn for the next time. Mm-hmm. So if there's a better or different way to do it, we'll take that on board and we'll carry that forward into our next delivery.
Just don't say it during the workshop, because she will.
Only to our own people.
Jesus. Thank you. All really good insights. And with our next topic, we're talking more about outputs, and instead of the detail behind the output, it's about the responsibility for those outputs or actions or deliverables. Between the BA and the SA being essentially project leads and having such a heavy responsibility for the success of a project, it's so important that from the outset they speak with the PM and together about who owns what and what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with. So this next topic, Ollie, is about understanding what you believe that shared scope is from your perspective in broad terms. I know it changes from project to project, but broadly speaking, what you think we share for a project.
That's great. I think there are a few things here. So in terms of that gray scope there, I think data modeling and system interfaces, they can be very technical. Data modeling, as we were talking here, we have the specific data types for the product that we use, Dynamics and Power Platform. So if the BA team is familiar with those, that's great. They can definitely add the inputs there. But we often have restrictions or limitations to those data types or other components of the platform. So I think those are really important, that the BA can kind of like draft something, but is really the SA that is going to confirm relationships, data types, and all of that. When it comes to system interfaces, I feel like the BA scope here is mainly on the functionality itself, right? An interface could be real time, it could be batch, it could be async, it could be done in many different ways. So I think the BA needs to say, okay, look, the functional requirement is this, technically speaking, the solution architect is going to say if it's possible or how it should be done, basically. So I think those two are very tricky ones, because they do have a dependency there on the two teams. One more element here would be UI UX. So again, because we are using a platform, we are restricted to that platform constraints, basically. So we have to follow what's doable, and also what's realistic, from a budget perspective and time frame. So sometimes anything's possible, but it doesn't really mean that you can do it within that time frame or budget that you have. If you don't have a budget, or if you don't have time frame, and if it's a custom project, then I think creativity is the limit. Really, there's everything's possible, but it's really never the case. So it's a tricky one. The last topic I was going to mention is project scope. Now this will depend on project. So if you're working on a more agile engagement where you're constantly getting your requirements and all of that, you probably don't have much that issue. But if you're working on a classic, let's say a waterfall project where you have a fixed price, fixed scope, you need to stick with that scope. And it's not just the SA or the BA responsibility here. I think possibly SA and BAs have more ownership naturally of the scope of a project. But I think other stakeholders, PMs, even testers, even junior developers or other resources, they also play a part in that responsibility. But I think the BA and SA have, I don't know, I'm going to say 50-50 here, that they both should control the scope with what was originally sold to the customer.
And this is where I have to just say, PMs get a free ride. That's all I'm taking from that.
Well, the PMs need to report to the customer, right? I feel like the PMs are getting our input, our output, and bringing that to the customer. This is a change. This is not in scope, and blah, blah, blah. So the PMs need to do the fight for us.
Yeah, they're constant bad cop.
Yeah. This needs its own episode.
But there's some things that are a bit more cut and dry. Like there's some things that as BAs we can fundamentally push back and say, no, that's not in scope. But if we sell, like say a company sells an out of the box integration with SharePoint or an ERP solution or something like that, if the BA hasn't worked with that before, the BA doesn't know what out of the box behavior is. So we can take a requirement and the customer would assume that because they're explaining it in such a way that, oh, well, that must be out of the box. The BA hasn't said that that's going to be a change request or whatever. And there's times like that, say when it comes to like integrations, and that's on us as BAs to raise the hand and say, look, I don't know this one. So I need to have a technical expert in there with me to be able to start the fight, not start the fight, but to raise awareness of the customer that this may not be within scope. When it comes to just out of the box things with model driven apps and things like that, like a lot of us would be very comfortable to say, I know that that's not out of the box behavior, so we'll need to take that back and we can have an offline discussion about that. But when it comes to when something is just sold as out of the box with a platform that we're not used to using, there's no way that we can be responsible for that. And I feel as though we as BAs should be a lot more cautious, like stick something on a RAID log because we don't know it. Like we should raise the hand first and then let it turn out to be nothing, rather than taking a risk on it and thinking that it might be okay. We should always be overly cautious. I'm saying that from experience, being burned before, where I've thought, oh well, this must be out of the box because the customer's speaking so confidently and the SA hasn't told me otherwise before. And then a requirement has come in and it's been a total and utter shock when the SA has pushed back and said, that's completely not in scope, that's completely custom, that's not what we sold. And I was none the wiser. So like that's one that I really appreciate the support from a techie for those sort of integration things that I just don't know.
And you normally wouldn't know, so yes, and I think it's all about communication, and having that open relationship and easy communication between the two teams, just so you can get feedback quick.
Yeah. One area that I'm not as happy, well, not that I'm not happy, but I suppose I'm a little bit territorial about is the data dictionary like, and not so much data modeling is a little bit, you know, kind of techie, but data dictionary, I just think is so ingrained in what you produce as a requirement and produce as part of your wireframes or mock-ups that it definitely is a gray area where we obviously need input from the SA, and we need schema names to be created from the solution architect. But I like having that initial control of it, because I hate when companies or clients think that they only have to sign off the requirement or the user story and can have a rolling data dictionary in the background, because that's caused issues before. So it is the one thing that I feel like I would share everything else, but that's my that's the piece that
It's your baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, not sure. Sorry, no, we can go on there, Drew.
When I think of shared scope at the project level with BAs and SAs, I always think of workshops, because sometimes projects or PMs maybe or customers forget that techies own workshops as well, or they have their own stream. Sometimes a full technical stream of workshops need to happen. And as BAs, we forget sometimes too to think of them with our elicitation plan. I think we could all be better at the start of a project sitting down and determining what's functional, what's technical, who needs to be in what, having a consolidated workshop plan, elicitation plan, whatever you want to call it. So there's a single view of what's expected for each SME in each business area. I think that's really important, and it's kind of often forgotten about.
Agreed.
Pretty cool.
On my own. Never mind. Not that important. So if we can think then about, turn it on its head, where BAs are crap. Now, if you think about pain points for yourself, Ollie, from working with BAs, because I know it can be tough, especially when there is so much common ground and that grey area can be muddy. If there's a new BA, if it's a BA who doesn't have that functional experience, maybe, whatever it might be, can you tell us about your experience with pain points with BAs? Please don't name any. Definitely with me. And how we might address it.
So I think it's basically, a mix of a few things we've said earlier. So in our case here, the BAs are very familiar with the technology. Now, if the BAs have a misunderstanding or they just don't know the platform or the technology, that will become a pain point. If it's a generic, if it's a custom .NET application that we are developing, it has to be all generic from a BA perspective. But otherwise, if they bring something to us that is too generic and the platform doesn't support, we're gonna have to go back and refine that requirement. So that can be a bit of a pain. But again, luckily it doesn't happen to us, as the BA team that we work with are very familiar with the platform. And going back to that, what is the good requirement? So requirement has to be clear. It can't be ambiguous. It can't be subject to interpretation. And especially when we look at the technical team and solution architects, we look at things at a binary level. We are very, very techy. So we may have a interpretation that it might not be wrong, but we're not looking from a user perspective. We might be looking from a technical perspective. So it has to be very clear to understand there. And I guess that to mitigate any issues here, it's communication and collaboration, right? We just have to communicate well and just make sure everybody's on the same page.
Very diplomatic.
Good work as well.
Name names, Ollie. Name names.
I'm not naming no names because there are no.
Because they're all here.
They're all here.
Yeah.
That would be likely.
God.
No,
but
never.
It's difficult. Like all project work, I'm all fuzzy. It is difficult, and I think from this podcast and the people we've spoken to and the conversations we've had, it just underscores the importance of those early conversations and setting out your stall, and how important it is to understand where people's strengths, weaknesses are, and to leverage them as well. So yeah, and that BA relationship is absolutely front and center when it comes to the ways of working.
Brilliant.
Unfortunately, I don't think you notice until it's gone on its head. how important it was. I was going to curse there.
That's too late.
Did you have any questions for us, Ollie? Anything?
No, I don't think I prepared any questions for you guys. But I should have.
That's okay. That is okay. So that's it from us. Before we wrap up, I wanted to thank my co-hosts for being here. Christina, thank you. Catherine, thank you. And of course, thank you to Ollie. That's us. We'll see you again next week. And in the meantime, please comment below. Tell us what your top insights are into your experience with this super important relationship between the BA and the SA. Do you have insights that you can share with us? Tell us in the comments and tell us why. If you want to get in touch with us, if you want to write for the BA project, learn more about what we do, or just get a steer on how to get started as a BA, you can find us at thebaproject.ie or thebaproject.co.uk. thebaproject.co.uk or simply at the BA Project across all social media. Thanks for watching and take care.